The Horned Woman. In the middle of a stormy night, a rich woman sat by the fire, carding and preparing some wool. It was really late, but she couldn't settle while the wind rattled the shutters and the house groaned and creaked in reply to the storm. Her family were all tucked up in bed, and the servants were asleep too. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the door. A harsh voice called out, "Open! Open!" "Who's there?" said the woman of the house. "I am the witch of the one horn," was the answer, but the howling wind drowned out the words. The lady couldn't think why someone would call at her home so late. Perhaps it was one of her neighbours. Maybe something was wrong and they needed help. So she opened the door. A woman entered. She had a pair of wool carders in her hand, but on her head was a horn. The weird thing was that it looked very much part of her, as if it had just grown there. Silently, the strange woman sat down by the fire and began to card the wool in violent haste. Suddenly, she stopped and growled, "Where are the women? They're taking too long." There was a second knock on the door, and another voice called out, "Open! Open!" Against her better judgment, the lady found herself opening the door to the next uninvited guest. And in came a second witch. This one had 2 horns on her forehead. In her hands was a wheel for spinning wool. "Move out of the way," she said. "I am the witch of the 2 horns." She sat down and began to spin wool faster than the lady's eyes could follow. And throughout that night the door knocked, knocked and knocked again. Each time another witch came into the house, until at last 12 strange women sat around the fire. The first with 1 horn and the last with 12 horns. They worked together as one, carding the thread, turning their spinning wheels. They wound and they wove, all the while singing an ancient rhyme. But not one word was said to the mistress of the house. The lady watched the horned woman in fear. She tried to rise and call for help, but found she couldn't move. She was frozen to the spot and unable to utter word or even cry, for now she was under the witch's spell. She looked around at the 12 women with their horns and their wheels, and she suddenly knew she was in mortal danger. Then one of the horned women rasped at her, "Rise, women, and make us a cake." Compelled to do their bidding, she stood up and searched for a jug to bring water from the well, so she could mix the meal and make the cake, but she couldn't find one. The witches laughed gleefully. "Take a sieve and bring water in it." So she took the sieve and went to the well, but the water poured through instantly. It was an impossible task, so she fell down by the well and began to cry. To her surprise, she heard a voice come from the well. It said, "Take yellow clay and moss and bind them together. Plaster the sieve so that it will hold the water." So she did, and the sieve held the water for the cake. The spirit of the well spoke to her again. Kindly, it said, "Return home, and when you reach the north angle of the house, shout out 3 times. The mountain of the Fenian woman is on fire. Look, so is the sky about it." So the woman went back to the house and did as the spirit of the well had said. When the witches inside heard her shout, a great and terrible cry broke from their lips, and they rushed howling out of the door and fled away to Shivnamon, as this was their home. The spirit of the well told the mistress of the house to go quickly and prepare her home against the witches' return. First, to break their spells, she sprinkled water in which she'd washed her child's feet just outside the door, right on the threshold. Secondly, she took the cake which the witches had made while she was away. It was made of meal mixed with blood taken from her sleeping family. She broke the cake into little bits and placed a piece of it in the mouth of each person asleep in the house. This meant they were no longer in the witch's power. Next, she took the cloth they had woven and placed it half in and half out of a chest, then locked it with a padlock. And lastly, she secured the door with a great crossbeam fastened to its sides so the witches could not enter. Having done all of these things, she waited for the witches to return. She didn't have to wait long, as soon they appeared at her home again, raging and shrieking for vengeance. "Open! Open!" they screamed. "Open, feet water!" "I cannot," said the feet water. "I am scattered on the ground, and my path is down to the lough." "Open! Open, wood, trees and beam!" they cried to the door. "I cannot," said the door, "for the beam is fixed to the side, and I have no power to move." "Open! Open, cake that we have made and mingled with blood!" they cried again. "I cannot," said the cake, "for I am broken and bruised, and my blood is on the lips of the sleeping children." The witches shrieked in anger and frustration. They took to the air and fled back to Shivnamon. Looking down, they knew straight away it must have been the spirit of the well who had ruined their plans. They uttered strange curses towards the spirit, but left the woman and the house in peace. One of the witches dropped a mantle as she flew away. It was found by the mistress of the house the next day, so she hung it up in memory of that night, and that mantle was kept by the family, who passed it down from generation to generation for 500 years after.